Hi Rupert, my name is Gurman.
Hello, Gurman.
Thank you for the amazing meditations. They've been very helpful, great insights. You mentioned that we have this infinite awareness which localizes as a finite mind, and then through the finite mind, as a person perceives its own activity as universe. I was wondering, and you also suggested that our essential nature as awareness is happiness, bliss, and it's peaceful. Why do we not see it when there is a lot of malevolence, crime, suffering, abuse that happens? How does infinite awareness, which is essentially peace and bliss, manifests itself as suffering?
Because Mary localizes herself in her own dream as Jane and forgets that she's doing so. So from Jane's point of view, Jane feels, I am a separate person. She doesn't yet know that she's not a separate person, that there are no separate people, that there is no outside world. She doesn't know that yet. From her point of view, she feels, I am a separate person. And the consequences of feeling I am a separate person are twofold. The sense of lack on the inside and conflict on the outside. So that is what enables, that is first of all what compels Jane to seek happiness through the acquisition of objects, substances, activities, relationships, and so on, because she feels, I am a fragment. I am lacking something. I need to be completed. I need to be fulfilled. I need someone or something to fulfill me. So Jane spends her life in Paris looking for fulfillment in objects and substances and relationships. She also feels that she's separate from other people, and therefore that enables her to behave towards other people in a way that she would never behave towards herself, because she doesn't feel the consequences of her own actions. She feels that somebody else feels it. Somebody else suffers, I don't suffer. So that enables her to behave in unloving ways. So these are the two inevitable consequences of the belief in separation. Unhappiness on the inside, conflict on the outside. So, but all this is still the activity of Mary's mind.
So if the essential nature of awareness is knowing, for example, yesterday there was a beautiful experience when you mentioned, you were answering someone's question and you said, you're staring into reality right now as we see it. And it is the activity of the infinite that you're looking at from awareness point of view. And a shift happened from me as a person to this me-ness or I-ness, I can't define it, but something like a presence from my side. So I was listening to your answer and looking around. It was basically not me looking, it was this awareness looking. And at the same time you were mentioning that you're staring right into reality. It made sense. But the question came in that if the nature of ours is essentially knowing, how does knowing forget itself? If the awareness cannot not know itself.
Because, Jane continues to know herself. Jane still feels, I am myself. Just as all of us feel, I am myself. Is there anybody here who is not currently having the experience, I am myself? If we ask this question to any of the 7 billion people in the world, we just stop them at any moment and say, are you now having the experience of being myself? They would all say yes. So the experience of being myself is our awareness of being ourself. The only difference is that most people's sense of their self is mixed up with the content of their experience. So everybody knows their self.
Yes.
Why? For exactly the reason you say, because consciousness is self-knowing.
Yes.
Its nature is self-knowing. Consciousness cannot not know itself. That's why nobody can ever have the experience, I am not myself. Has anyone here ever had the experience, I am not myself? What would that experience be? It's not possible to have the experience of not being ourselves. We all have the experience of being ourselves, but most of us, our experience of being ourselves is not our experience of ourselves as we essentially are. It is our experience of ourselves as we essentially are, mixed with the content of experience, which as a result qualifies ourself and therefore limits it. And therefore that's why most people feel not just the pure I am, which is the simple awareness of being. They feel I am this or I am that. That is the separate self, the temporary finite self. But even the knowing with which the apparently separate self knows itself, that is consciousness's knowledge of itself, albeit dimmed by experience.
Thank you. So then there is this forgetfulness when we think that we are this body, these thoughts, minds.
Yes, it is like an overlooking. We forget because the awareness of being is our primary experience. It's the first experience. Before the thinking and perceiving arise, there is just pure awareness of being. Then thinking and perceiving arise, and awareness of being is obscured or veiled by our awareness of thinking and perceiving. In other words, our awareness of things. The awareness of being continues, but it goes, so to speak, into the background because it is never completely eclipsed by the experience of thinking and feeling, but it is veiled by it. So it seems, from the point of view of the separate self, that our innate being and its innate peace and happiness is not present. Not because it is not present, but rather because we have turned away from it. But the separate self doesn't realize that. It thinks that it is absent. So that it then embarks on this great search in the world for peace and happiness. What it is really searching for is itself. Jane spends her life in Paris seeking happiness. What she's really seeking is Mary's mind. She wants to go back to Mary. She doesn't even have to go back to Mary. She is Mary already. That's all there is to Jane, is Mary's mind. But she doesn't realize that because she has allowed Mary's mind to become entangled with a little corner of experience called my thoughts and feelings and my body. And that prevents her from knowing herself as she truly is. She knows herself partially. Everybody knows their self partially. Or I should say, consciousness knows itself in everybody partially. Why does it know itself partially in everybody? Because it has become mixed with the content of experience. So here we are unmixing ourselves, divesting ourselves from the content of experience and allowing consciousness' knowledge of itself, the awareness of being, simply to shine.
And when we allow ourselves to do that in meditation, so from awareness point of view, would injustice be justified, that it's okay, it's just part of my experience? Or
remember, awareness doesn't have a point of view. Without Jane, Mary, remember Mary's asleep in Garrison, Mary cannot experience the streets of Paris. She doesn't see the streets of Paris from above. No, she can't experience. The only way Mary can experience the streets of Paris is if she forgets that she is Mary, localizes herself on the streets of Paris as Jane. So Jane is a point of view. All of us are points of view that enable consciousness to perceive its own activity as the universe. But without all of us, consciousness is blind. It cannot see a world, not because the world is there and it cannot see it, but without all of us, there isn't a world. The reality of the world, consciousness, remains, but it doesn't appear as a world. It's not the world that we know. The world that we know is only such from our limited points of view. Take away the point of view, you take away the appearance. You don't take away its reality. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that all there is to the world is the content of a finite mind. That's solipsism. I'm not suggesting that. There's more to the world than the sum total of all finite minds. What is that? Consciousness. But it appears as a world only from a localized perspective. You take away that localized perspective, reality loses its appearance and remains as it essentially is, consciousness.
So the things that we considered positive and negative, they are from a human point of view?
Yes.
Like the good and
well,
bad?
We could, yes, or instead of dividing things into positive and negative, good and bad, right and wrong, we could divide because you're talking about actions in the world, cruelty, stuff.
Yes.
We could divide our actions into those actions that are informed by and an expression of the true nature of reality, that is the oneness of everyone and everything. That's one category of activity. And the other category of activity is that those actions that are not informed by this knowledge of oneness, but are informed by the belief that there are separate individual objects and selves. Those are the actions that lead to what we call bad actions, injustice, cruelty, etc. All these actions come from the felt sense of separation. And the qualities, the actions that we consider to be positive, in fact, the qualities, the human qualities that we most admire in people, kindness, compassion, tolerance, justice, understanding, humor, warmth of heart, creativity, all these qualities, they're not really human qualities. They are qualities that are the nature of consciousness, albeit expressed through human beings. So really they are divine qualities. They are the divine qualities being expressed in human behavior.
So having these divine qualities that Krishna, who knew his real self, he still suggested to Arjun in Bhagavad Gita that you can go to war with your own brothers because they are doing injustice and you can use force to stop them. So that would mean that he recognizes...
Very occasionally, sorry I interrupted, carry on.
No, please.
Very occasionally, violence is necessary.
But then it wouldn't have an anger element to it, or...
If an armed robber burst into this room now, we wouldn't all smile sweetly at him and say everything is the nature of consciousness, therefore. No. Hopefully one of these young guys at the door would act very swiftly and very violently. That would be an intelligent, loving response to the situation. Yeah, it would involve violence.
Yes, but if they are also activity of the consciousness, why did consciousness design them to be malevolent and create injustice in the first place?
Consciousness doesn't design it like that. As I said, there is just a natural, causeless impulse in consciousness to manifest its potential in form.
Is it predetermined?
No, it's not predetermined. It is its nature. It is its nature to do so. It doesn't do it for a reason. It just does it because it is its nature to do so.
But it seems like in the potential, whatever happens at the end was already there in the DNA. Whatever happens to us physically, it's already coded in the DNA. Whatever happens, how a tree grows is in the seed already. So if awareness has this nature that it manifests, means it has that potential to create injustice even before it's been created. Does that...
Well, everything lies in potential in consciousness simply by virtue of the fact that it is formless. Therefore, all possible forms lie in potential. Yes, all possible movies can play on your TV screen. Why? because your TV screen is inherently empty of images. Therefore, all images are possible. As William Blake said, all things possible to be believed are an image of truth. All things possible, not just the true things. All things possible, not all things that are believed, all things that are possible to be believed are an image of truth, an image of consciousness. The thought 2 plus 2 equals 4 and the thought 2 plus 2 equals 5 are equally images of truth. One is true, one is false, but they're both images of truth. Images of intelligence, pure intelligence, temporary forms of pure intelligence. And it's the same with behavior. If you take 2 plus 2 equals 4 is kind behavior, 2 plus 2 equals 5 is unkind behavior. They're both temporary. One is kind, one is unkind, but they're both equally, ultimately, the activities of the same infinite whole. What enables one to behave in an unkind way is believing oneself to be temporary and finite. But that, as I said earlier, the only way consciousness can experience its infinite potential in form is by doing so from the localized perspective of a finite mind. So this collapse, this contraction into the finite mind is the price consciousness pays for manifestation. And it pays for it with its happiness. That is why in the hearts of all apparently separate selves there lives this longing to go home, this longing to be divested of the limitations that we acquire from experience and to go back to our true nature. A human being feels that as the longing for happiness, which in most cases takes us forward towards the object until we have been sufficiently disappointed by objects, activities, relationships and so on. Then the inward journey begins and we trace our way back to our essential nature, which is where happiness truly resides.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something else. Just that I can understand, because I hear what you're saying. Like the experience that I had, before I could not understand how you can be aware of something else, because I always thought that being aware of something needs to be me and the thing that I'm aware of. So I always saw two things. I thought it needed two. And then the experience I had, like I said, 3 years ago, I realized that it was awareness aware of itself, and only awareness is aware.
Yes.
That I was very clear, that it was awareness that is aware of itself. And that was the experience I had, and that was so clear. And then I started to think about, okay, what was the experience I had before, when you are in deep sleep, can you be in deep sleep awake?
Deep sleep is not a state that a person enters into.
That's right.
No, so
Right.
Your question, can a person remain awake in deep sleep? No, deep sleep is just the wide awake presence of awareness in the absence of objects.
Yes, can you be like that in life?
You can be aware of yourself as awareness in the presence of objects, yes. Like right now.
Okay.
You can be aware of yourself as awareness in the presence of objective experience. And you can be aware of the fact that all of this is a play of consciousness. So right now you can be aware, not just intellectually, but at a feeling, experiential level. You can be aware that all there is now in your experience is consciousness.
Yes.
And that you and everyone and everything is a modulation or a vibration of that. And that you as an apparently separate person are a localization of that consciousness through which it perceives its own activity as the universe, just as Mary falls asleep in Garrison, dreams that she's Jane on the streets of Paris. The entire dream is the activity of her own mind. The only thing, which is not a thing that is present in the dream, is the activity of Mary's mind. But from Jane's point of view, there seems to be subject and object, self and other, me and the world. That is just the mechanism by which the dreamed world is created and perceived. But it's all one thing. Jane can... Most of the time, Jane doesn't realize this. She believes she's a separate, discrete, independently existing person, and that everyone and everything else that she perceives on the streets of Paris are separate, independently existing selves and things. That's how it appears from her point of view. But it's possible for the dream to remain. It's possible to have a lucid dream. You know what a lucid dream is? It's possible for the dream to carry on, for Mary to localize herself as Jane, but not to lose herself completely in Jane. In other words, it's possible for Mary to perceive the streets of Paris through the sense faculties of Jane, but without losing her knowledge of herself. In other words, to remain awake during the dream. And that's what we're aiming for here, lucid waking.
When I said I was aware, and I was totally aware of what I was and what awareness was, but that the experience was back and forth. So am I the one who was coming back?
No,
that awareness is always there, so I was leaving?
You're still asking your question from the perspective of a person who has the experience of awareness. There is not the person that has the experience of awareness. Yes. You are awareness.
Yes.
It's the person that comes and goes in awareness. It's not awareness that comes and goes for the person.
Yes, well, that's what I thought I was saying. I was coming back and forth. Not awareness was always there, but I was the one who was...
No, you weren't coming back and forth because you are awareness. Your thoughts and perceptions were coming back and forth, as they do every day. When you fall asleep, you cease thinking and perceiving. Your thoughts and perceptions, at the end of every thought, thinking comes briefly to an end, likewise perceptions. But you, awareness, eternally are. You never start, you never stop, you never evolve, you never change. You are eternally present. And that is, when you say I, make sure that I refers to awareness.
I still kind of want you to explain to me the process of, I mean, if you were to take that all the way, the idea that thoughts never come into contact with objects, then wouldn't no one ever have to, what's the point of washing your hands? Like, you know what I'm trying to get at here? I mean, literally, like, the reason why people wash their hands is because of germs and things, but we can't see them. They're just thoughts. They're just thoughts about the objects. That's what I'm stuck on.
Ultimately, even objects are just thoughts. There are no real objects. Thought conceptualizes objects. So when I said, I don't remember saying it, but when I said thoughts never come in contact with objects, I was making a concession to the belief that there are such things as objects, and then, having granted that provisionally, suggested that thoughts never come in contact with the objects about which we think. I don't remember the context of it. However, at a deeper level of understanding, there are no objects. There are no separate, discrete, independently existing things. There is just one thing, which is not a thing, which is consciousness. We can't even name it, but let's in the context of this conversation, let's call it consciousness. There is one thing. There is one. Everything can be reduced and reduced and reduced and reduced to one thing, Well, that one thing cannot be reduced any further, because if it could be reduced any further, then that into which it was reduced would be even more essential than it is. Yeah. So if we reduce everything down to its essential reality, we end up with consciousness. That's the only thing, which is not a thing, that truly is. Objects are abstractions. Legitimate abstractions, necessary abstractions, useful abstractions that enable us to navigate everyday life. Selves, people, viruses, pandemics, tables, chairs, all of these are concepts that relate to an aspect of experience, and they enable us to negotiate our experience and to live practically in the world, and that they're necessary. But in the ultimate analysis, the things that these thoughts refer to don't actually exist in the way that we think of them. In fact, we don't think about objects because they exist. They seem to exist because we think about them.